Howdy. I got some epoxy here that I've been mixing up by Diamond Coat, and I poured a 1-to-1 ratio, part A and part B, which is a hardener and a resin, and I got it all mixed up together right here. It's pretty clear, a little bit of bubbles in there, but kind of hard to get rid of all of them. Anyway, when you mix these up, you get it mixed up real good. Use an IR infrared gun, check the temperature, and around 85 to 90 degrees you want to go ahead and add your pigments or your colors, and I'm sitting right at 90, and I'm going to use copper. So I'll take a popsicle stick here, dig it in my bag a little bit, and get some copper out. That's a little too much. There we go. Got some copper out of the bag. We're just going to dump it right in the clear epoxy. That was enough because I only got such a small amount of epoxy here. I don't need a whole bunch of pigment. The copper is also from, well, it's countertop epoxy. It's the same company as the Diamond Coat. That's just a different company, same owner, same people. And then you pretty much just mix the color in, and actually let me move the mold out of the way so you can see me mix it, and just watch how the colors just blend into the clear epoxy. And it's pretty cool watching the change here. This is like one of my favorite parts when making epoxy items, is adding the pigment and just watching it like mix up, because it's pretty mesmerizing in a way. Except for the way that I'm doing it right now is with a popsicle stick. Normally you'd use a mixer, but if I have a mixer in this small amount, all it's really going to do is introduce a lot of bubbles, and I don't want bubbles, so it's better to just go manually with a popsicle stick and mix it up together. That way you don't have a ton of bubbles you have to fight later, because you don't want to pour your epoxy and have a bunch of bubbles in there, because then you're going to have to fight to try to repair it or clean it or even scrap it and just start over and try again. So by going slow with a popsicle stick, you don't introduce as many bubbles as you would if you had a mixer. And typically when you do a mixer, big old paddle, I actually have a miniature one here, which I don't use no more because it is very conducive to adding bubbles. But typically when you do use a mixer, use a bigger amount of epoxy, maybe even a big 5-gallon bucket or something bigger than a regular cup that you would drink out of, like this red Solo cup. So if you have something bigger than that, you could use it, but when you do, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. Most likely you're going to have a 2-to-1 ratio. And I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. Excuse me. Or the other way around. I'd have to look up the instructions. I don't remember. But it would be basically more watery, more thinner. And when it's more thinner, the bubbles tend to rise to the surface a lot easier and pop. But when you have a 1-to-1, it's a thicker mixture or a thicker ratio. It struggles a little bit more because the density is a lot thicker, and so therefore the bubbles fight to reach the surface to be able to get popped. It's kind of like walking through a mud puddle versus walking through a water puddle. So your 2-to-1 mixture is going to be your water puddle, while your 1-to-1 mixture here is kind of like a mud puddle. And just think about like a bubble being inside of either one of those puddles. You know, it'd be a lot easier for that bubble to pop in the water versus the mud, if that makes sense. That's kind of like how my brain thinks, and how I like to try to use analogies and compare things to explain it to where other people can understand it. Alright, so y'all see we got it all mixed up here. Let me show you inside what it looks like here. Let's see if I can do this. And I'm just mixing. There's not really a whole ton of bubbles in here because I was really slow with this stick. And yeah, it may look like I'm going fast, but the stick spinning like this is considered slow compared to what a mixer would do. A mixer is going to spin super fast and way faster than this. So this is a slow mixing process, so therefore you don't bring in as many bubbles. And this is my mold here. I got a cross I'm going to make. So let me finish up my mixing right here, and then I'm going to do the pour and let y'all watch. It's going to be pretty neat. So I'm going to scrape the walls, get as much epoxy off as I can, and a few more swirls. Make sure it's a really good mix, because you don't want to have chunks of epoxy pigment, or I'm sorry, you don't have chunks of the pigments, because they're powder. They do have liquid pigments, but I'm using a powder pigment. You don't want to have chunks of it that does not get mixed with the epoxy. That's kind of like if you ever made a cake and you don't blend your cake mix all the way in with all the liquid, you're going to have pockets of powder when you go to eat that cake. Well, same thing in epoxy. When you use a powder pigment, you don't want those pockets of powder. So you got to make sure when you do this mix here, you're really thorough and everything's mixed up really well. And you check your temperature, and around 95 degrees, you want to pour. And I'm actually a little over, I'm at 98. So this is definitely time to pour. So I'm getting my mold here set down and ready to go. All right, make sure it's all cleaned out. I did clean it earlier. You don't want no debris in your mold, because it's just going to stick to the backside of whatever you're pouring. And in my case here is a cross. So I had a little hair in there I was trying to get out with just a razor blade. And I don't want that piece of hair on the backside of this cross here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the camera and try to flip it around as I pour, so y'all can see the pour from the top view instead of just right there at the angle you're at. So give me 1 second. Let me get prepped and ready. Clean off this, because I want all the epoxy in here as much as possible. All right, and then let me see. All right, let me get you flipped around here. All right, here we go. Let me try to stabilize my hand here, and then I will pour. Okay, there we go. And I like to start in the center. This is my other favorite part. My first part is mixing. My second favorite part is the pour. Because look at that, I just like all the ripples in it. You see that? That's so cool. And if you look in the epoxy as I'm pouring it, in the cup you can see all those little dots. Those are all bubbles. But as they hit the air, they kind of pop when they're pouring out. I just like to go slow. And yeah, I don't want to pour too fast and splash. And plus it's mesmerizing. I love watching this. So I take my time on the pour and just watch it. Let's just flow. And I'm just going to pop some bubbles using heat. And then what doesn't pop, I will spray with isopropyl alcohol, 99%. And that'll help, one, cool it off so it can start to solidify. But two, also pop all the remaining bubbles at the top surface. This looks kind of dark, actually. Look inside that cup, look at that color, and it comes out and it's real dark there. But once I cool it off with the alcohol, it'll actually lighten back up. Because you see right there in the dead center where I'm pouring the drip at, it's pretty dark. I could just sit here and watch this stuff all day. It's so cool. Alright, I'm going to put the phone down because I need to use my other hand to get the remaining parts of this epoxy out of the cup, because I want to use every single bit that I got. Hopefully that doesn't... I'll just let it rest there. Alright, 1 sec. Put this back up. It's kind of hard doing this by yourself. Alright. And I know there's not much in there left, but I try to use every bit that I can. Pour it all out. And that's about it. And I know it wasn't much, but we get that in there. Pour it, actually. use a cup to scrape the edges off, let it drip in the center. And before I go to even touch this thing, I want to show y'all, once this thing is like poured, or even when you're mixing it, the part A and the part B of your epoxy starts this exothermic reaction, which is actually pretty cool. So you can see here how it's like darker in the center and it starts lighting up around the border, around the edges. That's the exothermic reaction that's taking place inside the epoxy that you can't really see with the naked eye. But if you were to sit here and watch this and fast forward it, this darker spot's going to get lighter and lighter and lighter, or thinner, thinner, thinner as the time goes on and it cools off. But what I'm going to do now is just kind of mix all this up and see if it can get another pattern in here, something cool. Not that it would stay at that, because I'm going to hit it with some heat to pop some bubbles, and then I'll hit it with the alcohol to then hit some more bubbles and cool it off. Here, let me show you all this as I mix it up and just watch it. It's pretty cool. So I did this little swirl pattern. You can go like so. I'm going left-handed and I'm not a lefty, but you can see how it kind of changes a little bit. Or you can like do all kind of crazy things with it, but it's not really going to stay at that. As the exothermic reaction takes place, it's going to change it up a little bit and kind of dilute it and like kind of fade away in a way. But I do this just to kind of mix it up a little bit and make sure that the dark spot's not all in the same spot. But it looks pretty cool. There we go. Draw a line around the center, draw a line there, line out. Alright, give me one sec. I actually have to go get the alcohol, which I left across the room real quick. Don't want to waste epoxy, so I know it's only one little drip, but I'm not wasteful. Stand by. Alright, I'm back. I got the heat gun here, and you could use a torch, but this has a lower heat, so I like to use that because I don't want to put too much heat on it when this epoxy is already sitting about 105, maybe even 110 degrees. Let me check real quick, see what we got here. Actually, it's right at 100, so I could use more heat to pop these bubbles, but I'm just gonna be careful and not do that. Anyway, check it out. And actually, when you make like the beach type epoxy, like with the bubbles and the waves, people use heat guns to push the epoxy from the wind that comes out, and it's pretty cool. I'll show you that right here real quick. So this is on low heat, and you kind of see it moving a little bit. So this kind of distributes it, but it also pops a lot of these bubbles that are in there, and I don't know if you can really tell in the video or not. But if I turn this up, watch, you can see it move. See it moving? It creates like this wave type. And it also gets rid of, I think, those pockets of bubbles there. So all those dark spots kind of disappeared, and I think that's where like a lot of the bubbles were collecting out at. I turn it back down to low, and we're just going to kind of just barely get a little bit of everywhere, just to make sure all the bubbles, the major bubbles, are popped. I do see a collection right here in the center where the intersection's at of some bubbles, but the heat is not popping those because they're like micro bubbles. So what I'm going to do is use my alcohol. And I labeled it 99% isopropyl alcohol because that's what I poured in this bottle. Now watch what happens. This is pretty cool. I love it when you spray it with the alcohol because this pops bubbles and then cools it off. And watch what happens. It's pretty neat. And just watch it. It's pretty cool. If you look really closely, you can see a lot of it moving, because it's like kind of like rapidly cooling now. And I don't really see a whole lot of bubbles left. A little bit. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but I can see a few bubbles left. So I'm going to wait about another minute or so. And then I'm going to hit it again with the alcohol to try to pop the remaining bubbles that I can see in here. But if you look really close, you can see like this reaction happening microscopically. It's pretty cool. Because it's like heat on the bottom, but then the alcohol is cool. But now that the cooler alcohol is such a thin amount compared to how thick this epoxy is, it heated up the alcohol, but the alcohol still is able to pop the bubbles. And look at that color. That color's just pretty awesome. This copper color, kind of like a penny. Hit it again. Actually, let me flip the camera around because I'm trying to get a better view this way anyway. All right, we're going to spray this. And then watch this happen. It's barely moving. You can barely tell. But I do see that it is popping bubbles. Let's look right here real close. Yeah, you can see it all right in here happening. And that's why I say this is mesmerizing. I just love watching this take place. And as like the exothermic reaction happens, it kind of just disperses the epoxy and the colors, the pigments that are in it. And it looks pretty cool, actually. A little burst down there towards here. That was cool. But anyway, now I got this in this mold here, and I'll show you right side up. This is only the first step of this cross. Once it cures, I'm going to have to, I'll route the edges to make them smooth, because when you pull them out of this mold, these corners are going to be super sharp like razor blades. So I'll route the corners over, and then I'll just take clear epoxy and pour a flood coat or a final coat over it, which is also like a protective layer of this main pour right here right now. I love working with the epoxy. It's really cool. It's really fun. It's mesmerizing. It's therapeutic. It don't smell the greatest, but it's really, really neat. It's really, really cool. Yeah, it's just fun. Here in about, it takes about 24 hours for this one to cure fully. Like, it's going to harden up on the outside, and then it works its way internally to the core. And in the core, about 24 hours later, is pretty much solid and rock hard, and it won't be in a liquid state no more. It's kind of like ice. Right now it's water, and it's got to freeze to harden. So this is kind of the same thing. The epoxy is in its liquid state, and about 24 hours later it becomes solid. And then once that happens, that's when I can manipulate it and play with it or do whatever I need to do again. And I'll, like I said, route the edges, and then once I clean that up, then I'll put a flood coat over it, and this thing's gonna look super awesome when it's done. So be sure to check back when I'm done pouring the flood coat. You'll kind of have like a preview of what it's gonna look like, and then I might even do another video once it's completely done. I'll take it out in the sun and do like a little video around it. So stay tuned, come back to this video, and you can see like the progress of this cross being made. Thanks for watching, appreciate it. Take care, y'all have a good day, and let me know what you think about my hair. It's pretty cool. I change it up every couple months. So, all right, peace.